Was the bed moving? I turned on my back and looked up. Was I mad? Drunk? Insane? Giddy again? Or was the top of the bed really moving down, sinking slowly, regularly, silently, horribly, right down throughout the whole of its length and breadth, right down upon me as I lay underneath? My blood seemed to stand still. A deadly, paralyzing coldness stole all over me as I turned my head round on the pillow and determined to test whether the bed top was really moving or not by keeping my eye on the man in the picture. The next look in that direction was enough. The dull black frosy outline of the valance above me was within an inch of being parallel with his waist. I still looked on breathlessly. And steadily and slowly, very slowly, I saw the figure and the line of frame below the figure vanish as the valance moved down before it. I am constitutionally anything but timid. I have been on more than one occasion in peril of my life, and have not lost my self-possession for an instant. But when the conviction first settled on my mind that the bed top was really moving, was steadily and continuously sinking down upon me, I looked up shuddering, helpless, panic-stricken. Beneath the hideous machinery for murder which was advancing closer and closer to suffocate me where I lay. I looked up, motionless, speechless, breathless. The candle, fully spent, went out, but the moonlight still brightened the room. Down and down, without pausing and without sounding, came the bed top, and still my panic terror seemed to bind me faster and faster to the mattress on which I lay. Down and down it sank, till the dusty odor from the lining of the canopy came stealing into my nostrils. At that final moment, the instinct of self-preservation startled me out of my trance, and I moved at last. There was just room for me to roll myself sideways off the bed. As I dropped noiselessly to the floor, the edge of the murderous canopy touched me on my shoulder. Without stopping to draw my breath, without wiping the cold sweat from my face, I rose instantly on my knees to watch the bed top. I was literally spellbound by it. If I had heard footsteps behind me, I could not have turned round. If a means of escape had been miraculously provided for me, I could not have moved to take advantage of it. The whole life in me was, at that moment, concentrated in my eyes. It descended, the whole canopy, with the fringe round it, came down, down, close down. So close that there was no room now to squeeze my fingers between the bed top and the bed. I felt at the sides and discovered that what had appeared to me from beneath to be the ordinary light canopy of a four-poster bed was in reality a thick, broad mattress, the substance of which was concealed by the valance and its fringe. I looked up and saw the four-post rising, hideously bare. In the middle of the bed top was a huge wooden screw that had evidently worked it down through a hole in the ceiling, just as ordinary presses are worked down on the substance selected for compression. A frightful apparatus moved without making the faintest noise. There had been no creaking as it came down. There was now not the faintest sound from the room above. Amid a dead and awful silence, I beheld before me, in the 19th century, and in the civilized capital of France, such a machine for secret murder by suffocation as might have existed in the worst days of the Inquisition. In the lonely inns amongst the Harz Mountains and the mysterious tribunals of Westphalia, still as I looked on it, I could not move. I could hardly breathe, but I began to recover the power of thinking, and in a moment I discovered the murderous conspiracy framed against me in all its horror. My cup of coffee had been drugged, and drugged too strongly. I had been saved from being smothered by having taken an overdose of some narcotic. How I had chafed and fretted at the fever fit which had preserved my life by keeping me awake. How recklessly I had confided myself to the two wretches who had led me into this room, determined, for the sake of my winnings, to kill me in my sleep by the surest and most horrible contrivance for secretly accomplishing my destruction. How many men, winners like me, had slept as I had proposed to sleep in that bed, and had never been seen or heard from no more. I shuddered at the bare idea of it. But ere long all thought was again suspended by the sight of the murderous canopy moving once more. After it had remained on the bed, as nearly as I could guess, about 10 minutes, it began to move up again. The villains who worked it from above evidently believed that their purpose was now accomplished. Slowly and silently, as it had descended, that horrible bed top rose towards its former place. When I reached the upper extremities of the 4 posts, it reached the ceiling too. Neither hole nor screw could be seen. The bed became in appearance an ordinary bed again, the canopy an ordinary canopy, even to the most suspicious eye. Now, for the first time, I was able to move, to rise from my knees, to dress myself in my upper clothing, and to consider of how I should escape. If I betrayed by the smallest noise that I was still alive, that the attempt to suffocate me had failed, I was certain to be murdered. Had I made any noise already? I listened intently, looking towards the door. No footsteps in the passage outside, no sound of a thread, light or heavy, in the room above. Absolutely silence everywhere. Besides locking and bolting my door, I had moved an old wooden chest against it, which I had found under the bed. To remove this chest, my blood ran cold as I thought of what its content might be. Without making some disturbance was impossible, and moreover to think of escaping through the house, now barred up for the night, was sheer insanity. Only one chance was left me, the window. I stole to it on tiptoe. My bedroom was on the 1st floor, above an entresol, and looked into the back street. I raised my hand to open the window, knowing that on that action hung, by the merest hair's breadth, my chance of safety. They keep vigilant watch in a house of murder. If any part of the frame cracked, if the hinge creaked, I was a lost man. It must have occupied me for at least 5 minutes, reckoning by time, 5 hours, reckoning by suspense, to open that window. I succeeded in doing it silently, in doing it with all the dexterity of a housebreaker, and then looked down into the street. To leap the distance beneath me would be almost certain destruction. Next, I looked round the sides of the house. Down the left side ran a thick water pipe. It passed close by the outer edge of the window. The moment I saw the pipe, I knew I was saved. My breath came and went freely for the first time since I had seen the canopy of the bed moving down upon me. To some men, the means of escape which I had discovered might have seemed difficult and dangerous enough. To me, the prospect of slipping down the pipe into the street did not suggest even a thought of peril. I had always been accustomed by the practice of gymnastics to keep up my schoolboy powers as a daring and expert climber, and knew that my head, hands, and feet would serve me faithfully in any hazard of ascent or descent. I had already got one leg over the window when I remembered the handkerchief full of money under my pillow. I could well have afforded to leave it behind me, but I was revengefully determined that the miscreants of the gambling house should miss their plunder as well as their victim. So I went back to the bed and tied the heavy handkerchief at my back by my cravat. Just as I had made it tight and fixed it in a comfortable place, I thought I heard a sound of breathing outside the door. The chill feeling of horror ran through me again as I listened. No, dead silence still in the passage. I had only heard the night air blowing softly into the room. The next moment I was on the window-sill, and the next I had a firm grip on the water pipe with hands and knees. I slid down into the street easily and quietly, as I thought I should, and immediately set off at the top of my speed to a branch prefecture of police, which I knew was situated in the immediate neighborhood. A sub-prefect and several picked men amongst his subordinates happened to be up, muttering, I believe, some scheme for discovering the predator of a mysterious murder which all of Paris was talking about just then. When I began my story in a breathless hurry in very bad French, I could see that the sub-prefect suspected me of being a drunken Englishman who had robbed somebody. But he soon altered his opinion as I went on. And before I had anything like concluded, he shoved all the papers before him into the drawer, put on his hat, supplied me with one, for I was bareheaded, ordered a file of soldiers, desired his expert followers to get ready all sorts of tools for breaking open doors and ripping up brick floorings, and took my arm in the most friendly and familiar manner possible to lead me with him out of the house. I will venture to say that when the sub-prefect was a little boy and was taken for the first time to the play, he was not half as much pleased as he was now at the job in prospect for him at the gambling house. Away we went through the streets, the sub-prefect cross-examining and congratulating me in the same breath as we marched at the head of our formidable posse comitatus. Sentinels were placed at the back and the front of the house the moment we got to it. A tremendous battery of knocks were directed against the door. A light appeared at a window, and I was told to conceal myself amongst the police. Then came more knocks and a cry of, "Open in the name of the law." At that terrible summons, bolts and locks gave way before an invisible hand, and the moment after the sub-prefect was in the passage, confronting a waiter half-dressed and ghastly pale. This was the short dialogue which immediately took place. "We want to see the Englishman who is sleeping in this house." "He went away hours ago." "He did no such thing. His friend went away. He remained. Show us to his bedroom." "I swear to you, Monsieur le Sous-Prefect, he is not here. He—" "I swear to you, Monsieur le Garçon, he is. He slept here. He didn't find your bed comfortable. He came to us to complain of it. Here he is among my men. And here I am, ready to look for a flea or two in his bedstead. Renadine, calling to one of the subordinates, and pointing to the waiter, collar that man and tie his hands behind him. Now then, gentlemen, let us walk upstairs. Every man and woman in the house was secured. The old soldier was the first. Then I identified the bed in which I had slept. And then we went into the room above. No object that was at all extraordinary appeared in any part of it. The sub-prefect looked round the place, commanded everybody to be silent, stamped twice on the floor, called for a candle, looked attentively at the spot that he had stamped on, and ordered the flooring there to be carefully taken up. This was done in no time. Lights were produced, and we saw a deep raftered cavity between the floor of the room and the ceiling of the room beneath. Through this cavity there ran perpendicularly a sort of case of iron thickly greased, and inside the case appeared the screw, which communicated with the bed top below. Extra lengths of screws, freshly oiled, levers covered with felt, all the complete upper works of a heavy press, constructed with infernal ingenuity so as to join the fixtures below, and when taken to pieces again to go into the smallest possible compass, were next discovered and pulled out of the floor. After some little difficulty, the sub-prefect succeeded in putting the machinery together, and leaving his men to work it, descended with me to the bedroom. The smothering canopy was then lowered, but not so noiselessly as I had seen it lowered. When I mentioned this to the sub-prefect, his answer, simple as it was, had a terrible significance. "My men," said he, "are working down the bed top for the first time. The men whose money you won were in better practice." We left the house in the sole possession of 2 police agents, every one of the inmates being taken off to prison on the spot. The sub-prefect, after taking down my procès-verbal in his office, turned with me to my hotel to get my passport. "Do you think," I asked as I gave it to him, "that many men have been smothered as they tried to smother me in that bed?" "I have seen dozens of drowned men laid out of the morgue," answered the sub-prefect, "in whose pocketbooks were found letters stating that they had committed suicide in the Seine because they had lost everything at the gambling table. Do I know how many of those men entered the same gambling house that you entered, won as you won, took the bed as you took it, slept in it, were smothered in it, and were privately thrown into the river with a letter of explanation written by the murderers and placed in their pocketbooks? No man can say how many or how few have suffered the fate from which you have escaped. The people of the gambling house kept their bedstead machinery a secret from us, even from the police. The dead kept the rest of their secrets for them. Good night, or rather good morning, Monsieur Faulkner. Be at my office again at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, au revoir." The rest of my story is soon told. I was examined and re-examined. The gambling house was strictly searched all through from top to bottom. The prisoners were separately interrogated, and 2 of the less guilty of them made a confession. And I discovered that the old soldier was the master of the gambling house. Justice discovered that he had been drummed out of the army as a vagabond years ago, that he had been guilty of all sorts of villainy since, that he was in possession of stolen property which the owners identified, and that he, The croupier and other accomplices and the woman who had made my cup of coffee were all in on the secret of the bedstead. There appeared some reason to doubt whether the inferior persons attached to the house knew anything of the suffering machinery, and they received the benefit of the doubt by being treated simply as thieves and vagabonds. As for the old soldier and his 2 head myrmidons, they went to the galleys. The woman who had drugged my coffee was imprisoned for I forget how many years. The regular attendants at the gambling house were considered suspicious and placed under surveillance. And I became, for 1 whole week, which is a long time, the head lion of Parisian society. My adventure was dramatized by the illustrious playmakers, but never saw theatrical daylight, for the censorship forbade the introduction on the stage of a correct copy of the gambling house's bedstead. 1 good result was produced by my adventure, which any censorship must have approved. It cured me of ever trying rouge et noir as an amusement. The sight of green cloth, with packs of cards and heaps of money on it, will henceforth be forever associated in my mind with the sight of a bed canopy descending to suffocate me in the silence and the darkness of the night. The end. Hope to see you next time for a different type of mysterious adventure. See you then. Bye.